He called me from the driveway while I was still at work. Not from inside the house. Not sitting at the kitchen table where we'd had every hard conversation for the past 11 years. From the driveway, like he couldn't even bring himself to walk through the front door before saying what he had to say. "I need you to come home. We need to talk." I remember looking at the stack of files on my desk and thinking, this can't be good. My husband, a man who once drove 40 minutes in a snowstorm just to bring me soup when I had the flu, didn't call from driveways. He didn't do "we need to talk." He did long silences and then eventually slowly opened up. That was his way. Always has been. So when I pulled into our neighborhood 20 minutes later and saw him standing by his truck with his arms crossed and his jaw set the way it gets when he's already made up his mind about something, my stomach dropped before I even put the car in park. I got out. He didn't move toward me. "What's going on?" He looked at the ground first, then at me. His eyes were flat. Not angry, not sad, just done. Like he'd already had this conversation 100 times in his head and was tired of it. "I don't think this is working anymore." I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was so absurd that my brain couldn't process it as real information. "What isn't working?" He gestured vaguely between us. "This. I haven't been happy for a long time, Nora. Nora." He only used my full name when he was being serious. I stood there on our own driveway, in front of our own house, with the begonias I'd planted that spring still blooming along the front walkway, and I tried to make his words fit into the shape of our life. They didn't fit. Nothing about that moment fit. "How long is a long time?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "A while." That was all he gave me. We had been together since I was 29. Married at 31. I was 42 now. 11 years of mortgage payments, of splitting grocery lists, of knowing which side of the bed was his without ever having to think about it. 11 years of building something I thought we were both still building. And he was standing in the driveway, telling me it wasn't working. Like a subscription he'd forgotten to cancel. I asked him if there was someone else. He said no. I believed him. I don't know why. Maybe because I wanted to. Maybe because the alternative was too much to absorb all at once, and my brain was doing what it needed to survive the next 5 minutes. He asked me to stay somewhere else for a few nights. Give him space to think. His word. Space. Like we were a couple in our 20s navigating a rough patch, instead of a married couple with a shared mortgage and a dog, and 11 years of photographs on the walls. "This is my house too," I said. "I know." He didn't argue it. He just stood there, steady and immovable, the way he always got when the decision had already been made. "I just need some time." I packed a bag. I don't remember doing it. I remember standing in our bedroom looking at his half of the closet and thinking about how his shirts were all organized by color because I'd done that for him when we first moved in and he'd never reorganized them. I thought about that for some reason. The shirts. I stayed at my sister's place across town. Slept on her pull-out couch for 3 nights. She made me coffee every morning without asking questions, which is the kindest thing anyone has ever done for me. On the 4th morning, I remembered the lockbox. It was a small fireproof box I kept in the back of the closet, the one on my side, not his. Inside were my grandmother's jewelry pieces, our original mortgage documents, my social security card, and a sealed envelope my mother had given me years ago that I'd never opened. It wasn't sentimental impulse that made me need it. I'd had a conversation with my sister the night before that had shifted something in me. She'd asked one simple question. "Have you talked to an attorney yet?" I hadn't. I hadn't done anything except cry and sleep and drink coffee and stare at my phone. She said, gently but directly, "You need that box, Nora." She was right. I drove back to the house the next morning while my husband assumed was at work. His truck wasn't in the driveway. I used my key, walked in, went straight for the bedroom closet. That's when I heard the voice. Female. Laughing. Coming from the living room. I stood in the hallway with the lockbox in my hands, and I just stopped. My body stopped. My breathing stopped. Everything in me went absolutely still, in the way that happens right before something breaks. I walked toward the sound. She was sitting at our kitchen island, Not even the living room. The kitchen island where I made breakfast every single morning, with a mug of coffee and her hair down, wearing what I slowly recognized as one of my husband's flannels. The oversized green one I'd bought him 2 Christmases ago at the outdoor market downtown. She was maybe 30. Pretty, in an obvious way. She had her phone propped against the fruit bowl. My fruit bowl, the ceramic one, my college roommate had given us as a wedding gift. And she was laughing at something on the screen. She didn't notice me at first. I stood there for what felt like a full minute, but was probably 3 seconds, looking at this woman sitting at my kitchen island in my husband's shirt, with her feet tucked up on my bar stool like she lived there, like she had always lived there. Then she looked up. The laugh stopped. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. We just looked at each other. I don't know what my face was doing. I have no idea. I felt completely outside of my own body. She started. I held up one hand. I don't know where that came from, just instinct. I wasn't ready for whatever she was about to say. I set the lockbox down on the counter, very carefully, the way you put something down when you're trying not to shatter, and I pulled out my phone. I opened my recent calls. I called my husband. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey, come home," I said. "Right now." A pause. "Nora, I'm in the middle of." "Come home." He arrived 12 minutes later. I know because I stood in the kitchen for those 12 minutes while the woman on the bar stool made herself smaller and smaller and smaller, and neither of us said a single word to each other. When I heard the truck in the driveway, I felt my jaw tighten. He came through the side door, which meant he'd seen her car. He already knew what he was walking into. I could tell by the way he stopped in the doorway with his hand still on the knob. He looked at her, then at me. "Nora." "Don't," I said. "Just let me. Don't." He looked at the woman. Some silent signal passed between them, and she slid off the bar stool, picked up her phone, and started toward the front door. She paused near me. I think she almost said something. She didn't. Smart choice. The front door clicked shut behind her. Then it was just us, standing in the kitchen, in the house we'd bought together 8 years ago, the one that needed a new roof when we got it and had a yard that flooded every spring, the one we'd fought about and fixed up and slowly made our own. I asked him how long. He said 6 months. Almost immediately, I knew it was longer. "The truth," I said. He looked out the window. "About a year. A year. While I was here. While we were here together, having dinner and running errands and making weekend plans and doing all the 10,000 small, ordinary things that make up a shared life. He had been somewhere else entirely. Was I wrong about everything? I asked. Or just the last year? He didn't answer, which was its own kind of answer. I looked around the kitchen, at the coffee mug still sitting on my counter, at the fruit bowl, at the flannel, his flannel, the green one, folded over one of the bar stools now, and then I noticed something I hadn't seen when I walked in. On the kitchen table, under his laptop bag, a corner of paper was sticking out. I walked over before he could say anything and lifted the bag aside. It was a folder, beige, legal-sized, and underneath it, 2 more, neatly stacked. I opened the top one, financial records, account statements, our joint savings, our joint checking, our investment account that we'd started contributing to 3 years ago when we finally had enough breathing room in the budget. But these weren't just statements. There were transfer records. Money moving, not a little, not once. A systematic, methodical pattern of transfers over the past 8 months into an account I didn't recognize. An account that wasn't mine. An account that wasn't ours. I opened the second folder. Property assessment records. For our house. I opened the third. Correspondence with an attorney, dated 8 months ago. My hands were steady. I don't know how. My hands were completely steady as I paged through documents that told me, in careful legal language and financial detail, that my husband had not made a sudden emotional decision in the driveway 4 days ago. He had been building toward this for the better part of a year. Quietly, patiently, in the background of our ordinary life, while I'd been worried about us, he'd been planning an exit. I took out my phone and photographed every page. Every single one. Front and back. "What are you doing?" His voice was different now. The flatness was gone. Something else there. The first real emotion I'd heard from him in days. Protecting myself. I didn't look up from the documents. Nora, those are. I know what they are. I finished photographing the last page, closed the folders, and put them back exactly as I'd found them. Then I picked up the lockbox from the counter. I'll be in touch through an attorney, I said. You don't need to do that. We can figure this out between. No. I looked at him then, directly, for the first time since he'd walked in. We can't. I walked out the front door. I sat in my car in the driveway for a moment and breathed. Just breathed. In and out. The begonias were still blooming. The neighbor's kid was riding a bike in slow circles at the end of the block. A perfectly ordinary Tuesday morning, except that my entire life had just rearranged itself around me. I called my sister. She picked up on the first ring. I need the name of that attorney, I said. There was a pause, and then, I already looked one up. I'll text you her number right now. That was 3 days ago. 3 days that have felt like 3 months. The attorney, a woman named Christine who had a corner office downtown and a voice that made you feel like everything could be handled, sat across from me with the photographs I'd taken spread out on her desk and said very carefully that I had come to her at exactly the right time. The transfers, she explained, constituted dissipation of marital assets. That's the legal term. It means one spouse deliberately reducing or hiding shared assets during the period leading up to a divorce. In our state, that matters. A lot. She had questions. I had answers. Or I had photographs, which turned out to be close enough. She told me what I needed to do next. The list was specific. Freeze the joint accounts immediately, document every shared asset I could identify, request a complete financial disclosure through the court process, and under no circumstances agree to anything in writing without her present. I went home to my sister's pull-out couch that night and wrote down everything I could remember. Every account I knew about. Every asset. Every purchase over the past 5 years that I could recall. My sister sat next to me with her own notepad and helped me organize it. We worked until almost midnight. The weeks that followed were not dramatic. That's the thing no one tells you about the aftermath of a betrayal. It's mostly paperwork, it's mostly phone calls, and waiting, and trying to eat normally, and going to bed at a reasonable hour, even though your brain is a live wire at 2 in the morning. It's not a montage. It's just very slow, very deliberate work. My husband hired an attorney of his own. We stopped speaking directly. Everything went through the lawyers, which was, honestly, a relief. I didn't have to look at him. I didn't have to manage my face. Christine was very good at her job. The dissipated assets were traced, documented, and factored into the settlement. The house, our house, went through a proper valuation, given that we had both contributed to the mortgage and the renovation costs. Over 8 years, my equity stake was significant. The investment account, which he had been quietly draining, was reconstructed from records the financial institution was legally required to provide. He did not end up with what he had planned to end up with. I don't say that with satisfaction, exactly. It's more like watching a math problem resolve correctly. Like the numbers finally adding up the way they were supposed to. I found an apartment about 6 weeks after I left. Ground floor of a 2-story building, 3 blocks from the park where I like to run in the mornings. It had good light and a kitchen with enough counter space and a bedroom that was entirely mine to arrange however I wanted. The first night I slept there, I put my phone on the nightstand and just looked at the ceiling for a while. My own ceiling. My own nightstand. My own complete silence with nobody else's schedule or habits or emotional weather filling up the space. I cried a little. Not from sadness, exactly. More from the particular exhaustion of having carried something heavy for a very long time and finally setting it down. I went back to work. I'd taken 2 weeks off. My boss had been understanding, or at least professional about it, and returning felt like putting on a coat I hadn't worn in a season. A little stiff at first, then familiar, then just normal. I started therapy. Wednesday afternoons with a woman who had a small waiting room with good magazines and a white noise machine outside her door. She didn't tell me how to feel. She just helped me figure out what I was actually feeling, which turned out to be more complicated and less linear than I'd expected. There were days I missed him. I want to be honest about that because the edited version of this story makes it sound cleaner than it was. I missed him. I missed the version of him I thought existed. I missed the particular comfort of a long marriage, the shorthand and the rhythm of it. I missed our dog, who had stayed with him. That was harder than I expected. I missed the house, specifically the kitchen in the late afternoon, when the light came through the window over the sink, at that angle I'd always loved. But I didn't miss being lied to. I didn't miss the feeling I'd been carrying for the past year without naming it. That quiet, persistent sense that something was off, and I couldn't find it, and maybe it was just me. It wasn't just me. It was never just me. About 4 months after I moved out, my sister called me with what she called intelligence. Apparently, through the mutual social circle that small cities produce, she had heard that the relationship between my husband and the woman from my kitchen island had ended. Not immediately after everything came out. They'd tried to continue, apparently. But within a few months, it had collapsed. My sister delivered this information with barely concealed satisfaction. I let her have it. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt something quieter than that. Just a kind of acknowledgement. The recognition that what he'd been protecting wasn't actually what he thought it was. He'd dismantled 11 years of real life for something that didn't hold. That's his to sit with, not mine. The settlement was finalized on a Tuesday morning. I signed the papers in Christine's office, walked out into the November air, and stood on the sidewalk for a minute, thinking about nothing in particular. A woman walked by with a stroller. A delivery truck idled at the corner. A barista at the coffee shop across the street was writing on a chalkboard sign. Ordinary Tuesday. New version. I've been thinking lately about what I would say to myself at the beginning of all this. Standing in the driveway, hearing those words, feeling the bottom drop out. I don't think I would say anything reassuring. I don't think I'd say it gets better, or you'll be fine, or any of the things people say when they mean well but don't know what else to offer. I think I'd just say, take the photos, get the box, call the attorney, and then, you're going to be okay. But the okayness is going to come from you. Not from how it ends. Not from what he loses. From who you are when you decide you're not going to disappear, just because someone tried to make you. He thought he was taking everything when he stood in that driveway and told me it wasn't working. The house, the future we'd planned, the version of myself I'd built around us. But what he didn't account for was this. I walked out of that house with something he couldn't plan around, couldn't document, couldn't transfer into someone else's account. I walked out knowing exactly who I was, and it turned out, after everything, that was the only thing I actually needed to keep.